Walkthrough of the documents required to purchase. So there's some disclosure documents, there's the contract. I'll kind of give a walkthrough and explain them so that when we actually have to fill these out and sign things, you've seen them before. I'll also attach copies of these to the email that I'm sending this video in, so you have copies to follow along with, and then you can write down any questions. We can go through them before we have to fill these out, and then when it's time to buy, we're ready to go. So the first one is called the Disclosure of Representation and Trading Services. This form explains the client relationship and the benefits of having representation and agent, and what you get as a non-client, unrepresented. It's very specific. So as a client, you get undivided loyalty of your agent. As a non-client, no loyalty. As a client, you get full disclosure. So anything your agent any information they obtain pertaining to the transaction by legal means, without creating a conflict of interest, they have to tell you immediately. No duty of full disclosure if you're unrepresented. Duty to avoid conflicts of interest. The conflict of interest rules are a lot more strict and stringent than they used to be. We can't solicit any information from people at open houses. We have to get them to fill out forms before we can show them the house if they don't bring representation, so that they know that we don't represent them at all, and it protects us and it protects you. So I have a duty to avoid conflicts. If you're unrepresented, I have no duty to avoid conflicts of interest. Confidentiality. This runs for the duration of my life. I'm going to learn things, agents specifically learn things about their clients that most people wouldn't know. They have a duty to keep all of that confidential forever. If you're unrepresented, there is no duty to confidentiality. The other thing that used to be on this form was duty to obey lawful instructions, and that's still something that's very important because that is part of my duty as an agent. It's just not on the form anymore. So after we go through all of these, then I will click yes, I'm representing you as my client. My name will be there, Scott Nelson, my brokerage, Royal LePage North Star Realty. I'll sign and we'll date it. Your name or names will be here, initials and date. First form, no problemo. The next one is privacy notice and consent, and what this one does is it explains why we collect your personal information. So basically the only time from a purchase standpoint, only people who are going to see your names are the people we're writing the contracts for, the conveyancing departments and managing brokers at the offices, and the lawyers. When you're selling your home, your name will be on title, and so people will see your information there, and then any contracts that get written on your property, your name will be listed on there. And it's also, it would show up if you were listing it on the realtor side of the real estate websites. We collect your personal information primarily because we have to. So the primary collection is through FINTRAC. FINTRAC is an anti-money laundering, anti-terrorism form that we have to fill out. Basically, we have to verify your identity. So you're going to give me your driver's license. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to look at you. I'm going to say, yes, that's you. And I'm going to fill out all of the pertinent information. So they want to know your name, your address, your date of birth, and then they want to know information about the specific document we're using to verify your identity. So driver's license, province it was issued in, country, license number, and expiry date. We fill all those forms. That stays at our office for 7 years. Beyond that, nobody gets your information other than the scenarios that I laid out earlier. This is a new section of this form called the opt-out form. Most of my clients initial this box and this box. 2C says other realtors may communicate with you to determine if you require additional real estate services. Most people don't want to hear from other agents. 2D, the boards and other realtors or their brokerage may communicate with you to participate in surveys. Most people don't want to do surveys. After we've gone through the form and initialed the boxes we want to initial, name printed, signature date, name printed, signature date. That will be my name, that will be my brokerage, and I don't have to sign this form. Next one is the contract of purchase and sale. So this is going to be the same one we write, and when you're listing your home, you're going to get the same one back. So this works in both directions and both parts of the transaction. The first page is all Definitions. I'll let you guys go through those definitions. Customary costs is an important one to know. So when you're the seller, you're going to be paying your lawyer and notary fees. You're also going to be responsible for the real estate commission plus GST. Those are the costs, the primary costs to the seller, and costs of clearing title. So if there's any financial charges on title, we have to get those off of title. And I'll explain those more if we're buying something that has financial charges, or if we were selling something for you that has financial charges. We'll go through that in more depth. Costs borne by the buyer for the purposes of this video. We're going to pay lawyer, notary fees, land title registration. If we need to get a survey certificate and there's not one available, but the bank wants one, we may have to hire a company. I've never had that happen before. Any costs associated with the mortgage. We're going to be responsible for fire insurance, property transfer tax, and we're also going to be responsible for the costs of getting an inspection, and any GST if applicable. That's only applicable if we're buying a brand new build. Risk means the buyer should arrange for insurance effective midnight 01 on the completion date. We'll talk a little bit more about completion date. And now we'll scroll down and get into more of the meat and potatoes of the contract. So brokerage will be mine if I'm writing the contract. We'll have the date, the address of the brokerage, postal code, phone number, who prepared the contract, my name will be there, and the MLS number of the listing we're writing an offer on. This will be the seller's information. This will be the buyer's information. This is going to be the subject property, the one we're writing the offer on. The address we all know about. The property, the PID, property identifier number, is a 9-digit number. We get it. I'll get it off of title and off of the listing. It will be filled out there along with the legal description. The legal description will be as written on the listing. If I'm doing your listing, I use the title to get the legal description. Purchase price. This is where we're going to write our offer. It's like a check. It'll be numerically here. It'll be written out here. And then after we've written our offer, we're going to pick a deposit. Now, the deposit is an amount that is going to be due upon or within 24 hours of us removing our subjects. It's going to form part of the purchase price, but we need to have access to it prior to completion. And what that means is you're going to have, it's going to be an amount of money, usually close to 5% at minimum of the purchase price. And we're going to need it in the form of a bank draft. The bank draft is addressed to my brokerage and it is held in our trust account to form part of the purchase price. The deposit basically means it comes in to say that we as buyers are not walking away from this contract. If we're buying $1 million house and we put a $50,000 deposit down, most people aren't walking away from $50,000. So that is the reason for the deposit. It's security for the seller to know that we're serious. It will say deposit amount of here, and it'll say it's payable within 24 hours of acceptance unless agreed as follows, and it will say payable upon subject removal or within 24 hours of subject removal by way of bank draft. And the trust account it's going to go in is Royal LePage North Star Realty in trust. The bottom of every page on the purchase contract, we're going to initial. And then these are just standard subjects. So I'm going to go through the subjects with you. You can have a quick read through what are called the conditions. So the difference is a subject is something that we have to fulfill, and if we're unable to fulfill, we can back out of the contract legally. It also is going to have a specific date and sometimes a time when we have to have that subject fulfilled by. So the first subject to the buyer on or before, we'll just use November 14th as a date. November 14th at the buyer's expense, obtaining and approving an inspection report against any defects whose cumulative cost of repair reasonably may adversely affect the property's use or value. So we're going to get an inspection. We're going to go through the inspection. If there's anything wrong with the inspection, we're going to either ask them to, we're going to decide. If it's not major, we'll probably just let it go. If it is major, we're either going to ask them to fix it, reduce the price by an amount that will allow us to fix it, or back out of the deal altogether. This condition is for the sole benefit of the buyer. That means it's our subject. Subject to the buyer on or before November 14th, obtaining and approving a copy of the title search results against the presence of any charge or other feature, whether registered or pending, that reasonably may adversely affect the property's use or value. So there's a number of things we'll see on title. And again, we'll go through those in more detail when we actually have a title to look at. If the title looks good, we're going to remove this subject and we're going to incorporate the title into and form part of the contract. Fire and property insurance, if you're buying a strata property, it's content insurance because your strata fees insure the building. If we're buying a detached home, we're going to get insurance to insure the building and the contents. There's hundreds of insurance companies out there. We just have to go out, make sure we can get insurance, figure out it's going to cost an amount that works for us, and if it does, we can remove this subject. Subject to a suitable new first mortgage being made available to the buyer on or before. So by suitable, it means it's not just that we can qualify for a mortgage, but we can qualify for a mortgage that will allow us to live. So, we might be able to qualify, but the bank might say you need 35% down. Well, that's not going to work. So we want to make sure that we're qualifying for a mortgage that works for you, that everybody's comfortable with. And if the bank says yes and everything's good, we remove that subject as well. Subject to the buyer on or before November 14th, obtaining and approving a property disclosure statement. So the property disclosure statement is going to say it discloses material latent defects. So things about the property that the owners know that will be very difficult for us to figure out. They're going to pass that information on. We're going to review it, make sure we like it. And if we do, we will remove that subject and we will incorporate it into and form part of the contract. The samples we're going through right now are for strata properties, so it's good because lots of people buy condos. If this doesn't pertain to you, then don't pay much attention. So, subject to the buyer on or before a date, obtaining and approving the follow strata documents. So there's Form B, depreciation report, budget, strata plan, bylaws, rules, meeting minutes, AGMs, a number of documents we need. We want to review them and make sure everything looks good in them before we're moving forward. The one that's most important now is insurance. So we've seen in the news recently that there have been lots of issues with strata insurance. We want to make sure that if we're buying a strata property that they have no problem getting insurance and that everything is reasonable and affordable. The next are a bunch of conditions that I put into these properties. Have a read through, make sure everything makes sense. Again, I will go through these ones with you more in depth when we're actually writing an offer, but I think it just helps where you get a chance to go through and review things. Completion date. So this is the date where we have to have our insurance in place. This is also the date when the money moves. So if we're just buying, oftentimes we're going to try and find a completion date that works for the seller, because in that case, we're trying to negotiate a better price, and if we can offer dates that work for them, they might be more willing to negotiate on price. If we've sold a property or we're selling a property, we need to make sure that we have completion dates and possession dates that work as part of our sale, and I'll walk you through exactly how that works. So completion is the date that we complete and the money moves. Possession is the date we get the home. We're going to pick a time, let's say 12 p.m. most of the time. The adjustments date is the date where we start paying property taxes. So if it's later in the year, let's say we take possession on December the 1st, the previous owner, the seller, is going to be responsible for the property taxes from January 1 to December 1. We're going to be responsible for property taxes from December 1 to December 31st. That's how the adjustments work. You'll see it on the statement of adjustments. Your lawyer or your notary will walk you through exactly how it works. Included items. We're going to list the appliances in the property. If it's got a suite, we want those appliances too. If they've got very fancy or nice appliances, we're going to be very specific using model numbers to make sure that we get the appliances as seen when we were there. We're also going to put in anything else that you might want to include. I have had people include lots of things. I've had people include nothing other than the basic appliances. Excluding means any fixtures that you want removed. Sometimes we put a couple things in there as well. We're going to view the property on whatever date we were there. And then we're going to go through some other specifics here. So one to review is seller's particulars and residency. If we're buying a home from a non-resident, we have to be very careful. So this clause is in here for that. Have a read through. Basically, we're going to need something called a GST certificate to verify that the non-resident has been paying their appropriate taxes. if we don't get a GST certificate, we're going to hold back 25% of the purchase price until we get one. And if we don't get one, that 25% is going to go to pay the GST bill. Time is always of the essence. If there's a time on there and it says we need to do something by this date and this time, if we're 1 minute late, the contract is null and void. So time is always of the essence. Buyer financing, we need to have our financing in place and ready to go. We can't call and say there's a problem the day before. The expectation is that if we're purchasing the property, we've got our financing in place and we're going to get the deal done. We talked about risk. Plural is a morbid clause in this contract. Any reference to a party includes that party's heirs, executors, administrators, successors, and assigns. Singular includes plural and masculine includes feminine. Basically, once we have a firm and binding contract, nothing can remove it from being firm and binding, not even if we were to pass away. Again, it talks about personal information here. Assignment of remuneration. The listing brokerage is responsible for assigning the remuneration. Restriction on assignment of contract. This is a new clause that came in because of the quote-unquote shadow flipping that was in the news a lot in 2016 and 2017. Assignment of contract means if we were to purchase a home and we had a long completion date. So we purchase a home and then we're not completing for 4 months. And sometime around the 2-month mark, we decide we don't necessarily want to own this home, but we were already firm and binding on it. Previously, you would do what's called an assignment, which would be you'd relist it for sale and you'd sell your interest in the contract. So for assignments, the buyer and the seller now agree that this contract, A, must not be assigned without the written consent of the seller, and B, the seller is entitled to any profits resulting from an assignment of the contract by the buyer or any subsequent assignee. So they're just making sure that the sellers aren't getting hosed. So we're not assigning without written consent, and if we make any money, the seller gets it. Agency disclosure, you're going to initial that I'm your agent. Acceptance irrevocable. So if the buyers have subject clauses and we don't have any seller's subjects, the seller's subject would be if we had accepted another offer and we were accepting and there was a backup offer. It would say, subject to the seller ceasing to be obligated to the previously accepted contract to purchase and sale, on or before a date, and this condition is for the sole benefit of the seller. So if we have a seller subject and buyer subjects, either could revoke based on those subjects. If there's only buyer subjects, once we've accepted the offer, we can't back out, they can. That's what acceptance irrevocable means. Offers are open until a certain period of time. So we might give the other side 24 hours. So if we're sending the contract over at 8 o'clock p.m., we might write 8 o'clock p.m. on the following day. Buyer's name, signatures, and printed. We're going to initial that we're Canadian citizens or residents, and the seller is going to accept on the date, initial, and sign and print their name. Now, if we're going back and forth and negotiating, what happens is the other side crosses out what they don't like. So let's say they don't like our price. They're going to cross out our price and write a new price and put their initials beside that price. We're then responsible to either put our initials beside that price or cross it out and put new initials beside a new price. And that goes the same for the entire contract. Completion dates, possession dates, any subject clauses that the sellers don't like or we don't like, we're going to negotiate back and forth, and that's basically how it's going to go. This is the disclosure of remuneration form. It's my responsibility to inform you of what I get paid for any of the for the purchase. So it'll say notice to the name of you about this particular property. I, Scott Nelson, am licensed under the Real Estate Services Act, and I disclose that my related brokerage, Royal LePage North Star Realty, anticipates receiving a commission of, let's say, the most standard of commissions in an industry that's not allowed to have anything standardized, 3.22% on the first 100,000 and 1.15 on the balance from the listing brokerage with respect to real estate services provided to you or on your behalf in relation to the subject real estate. So that's what I'm getting paid. I fill that out, I send it over to you. Disclosure was made to you in compliance with Section 511, rules under the Real Estate Services Act and I'm generally going to put digitally because most of the time we're doing digital signing. I'm going to send it to you. It's going to be dated, my name, my signature, and then you're going to say that you received it digitally on this date, your names, your signatures. The last form here is to talk the FINTRAC form, which I was telling you about. So it's going to have the transaction property address, my name, my brokerage, and the date that I look at your information. There's your pertinent information. There's your identification I verify. After I verified that it is actually you I'm dealing with, I'm going to tick that you're a low-risk Canadian citizen or resident physically present. And the purpose or intended nature of the business relationship is residential property. Those are the documents. Those are the basics. We're also going to have a subject removal, but we'll cover that because it's only one document when we get there. Go through these. If you have any questions, write them down. Give me a call. I would love to answer everything you have.